She posted thirst traps while calling me insecure. Now she's the one obsessed with me. I used to think Eva and I were going to be one of those couples who actually made it. I was so sure we were going to get married, have kids, get a house, all of it. We had been together for years, long enough that most of our friends and family just assumed marriage was just the next natural step anyway. We lived together, shared bills, shared a dog. We had pretty similar routines and everything. We had built a whole little life without ever officially tying the knot or saying any vows, but it always felt implied. And for the most part, things were good. Not perfect, but good. Comfortable in an easy way. We had our own apartment, and our dog was a rescue from a shelter she'd worked with before. Our weekends were predictable but never boring, and we loved each other. Genuinely. I never doubted that. Not at first. We had issues, sure, that was normal. And I'd known some of hers since the day I met her. She could be off-putting at times. She was very full of herself. She cared about her appearance a lot, sometimes to an exhausting degree. And she could also be blunt to the point of being mean, but always claim that she was joking, even when the joke didn't land. Sometimes she used teasing as a way to take small jabs and then acted confused when it hurt my feelings. But that was just part of who she was. I loved her anyway, and most of the time, those parts of her didn't define our relationship. Or at least they didn't until almost a year ago. It all started when she lost her job. Eva was a vet. She loved that job. She loved telling people she was a veterinarian. Being a kind of doctor was a huge point of pride for her. It made her feel accomplished and impressive. It was a big part of her identity. So when she got laid off, it kind of broke something in her. I had never seen her so deflated. For a while, she barely got out of bed. She'd wake up, scroll a little, fall asleep, wake up again, scroll more, over and over again. She stopped doing her hair, stopped putting on makeup, or really going out. Even the dog started whining outside the bedroom door because she wouldn't get up to walk him. I was the one primarily taking care of him. I tried everything. Talking to her, cooking her favorite meals, giving her space. I even suggested therapy and sometimes invited her to hang out with friends, but nothing worked. Her whole routine became bed, her phone, and hours of silence. And then TikTok entered the picture. She didn't even use it before. She was mostly an Instagram user. But then one morning, I left for work, and she was in bed like she usually was, except she was watching TikTok videos back to back. When I came home hours later, she was in the same exact position, watching some mini-series about a creator's cheating husband. From there, it became her entire day. She would lie there, phone inches from her face, watching people vent and do makeup or talk about losing their jobs and bouncing back. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured it was helping her feel less alone when I wasn't around. I didn't realize it was becoming something else entirely. A few weeks in, she told me that she wanted to make her own videos and start posting. She wanted to do a mini-series of her own about losing her job, how it happened, how she was handling it, and all that. She said people online would relate to it, and maybe it could even be helpful for some. I told her it couldn't hurt to try. In fact, I encouraged it. She hadn't sounded motivated about anything in weeks, so I wasn't about to shoot her down. The first video did surprisingly well. Not viral, but definitely more attention than the average person gets on their first post. There were lots of comments of people sharing their own stories, and I saw the way she lit up when she read them. She made another one, then another. She posted updates about the stress of job hunting and how she was struggling. Only I knew that she wasn't really job hunting at all and spent all her time in bed. But people responded with paragraphs of empathy, and they thanked her for sharing her story. And it was like something flipped back on inside her. The sadness didn't disappear entirely, but she suddenly had energy again. She was up early filming little clips, editing them, responding to comments, and brainstorming new posts. Her follower count climbed, so she was constantly checking her phone. Every notification made her jump, and she was so focused on each new comment and milestone, and I was genuinely happy to see her engaged in something again. After the job loss series ran its course, she shifted into something more familiar. She started making videos on health tips for pets. Those did well too. For a few weeks, she seemed stable and productive. She was still out of work, but at least she had a routine again. But then the views started to slow down. A few hundred instead of a few thousand. Some videos barely got traction at all. She kept refreshing notifications, waiting for something to change, but it just didn't. And that's when she started spiraling. She'd spend all her time scrolling through other accounts and analyzing what they were doing that she wasn't. She would rant about the algorithm constantly. and she became obsessed with posting times, trending audios, hashtags, and all sorts of things. She'd even delete videos that didn't perform well. Every conversation drifted back to her numbers. She'd ask me for feedback but got irritated whenever I actually tried to offer any. She started comparing herself to random people online with this bitterness that didn't sound like her at all. She'd always been confident, overly so in fact, but suddenly she was constantly worried about other people. I didn't want to admit it to myself, and she definitely wouldn't have admitted it herself, but it definitely became kind of an addiction. And for some reason, I just knew that it was only the beginning of something bigger and messier than either of us expected. Through it all, though, I kept trying to be supportive, even when it got harder to pretend everything was fine. At first, I told myself she just needed something to feel excited about again, and if social media helped her feel connected or productive, then I could deal with being ignored for a little while. That's what I told myself. But a little while turned into weeks, then months, and somewhere along the way, I became a side character in my own relationship. She barely looked at me most days, and she hardly ever talked to me unless it was about something she wanted to film, or something she saw online that she needed to dissect for the 10th time. She forgot plans that we made and conversations that we had. She never asked about my day. She just didn't seem to care about anything but her followers anymore, least of all me. We could be sitting on the couch together, literally touching shoulders, and I'd still feel like I was completely alone. Half the time she didn't even register that I'd walked into the room, and she'd nod at things I said without hearing a word. It got to the point where she wouldn't even clean up after herself or take care of the house. I kept reminding myself she was going through a rough patch, and I kept trying to be patient. But it was hard to stay patient when the person I loved didn't seem to notice me at all. It was like she'd replaced our relationship with a screen and a bunch of strangers who didn't actually know her. Then everything got worse on a random day, and with a video that should have been harmless, but was the complete opposite. I heard her recording a video with our dog, but wasn't paying that much attention. It was something about the right way to do CPR for pets, where to place your hands and how to check for breathing and all that. Later that afternoon, she posted the clip. She didn't think anything of it. She had filmed similar informational things before. In the video, she wore one of her usual outfits, which was a tight yoga set she always lounged around in at home. It wasn't anything special to her. She had worn it 100 times while doing laundry or cooking or taking the dog out. I didn't think twice about it either. But the internet had a different reaction. Within an hour, the numbers were climbing faster than anything she'd ever posted. The comments poured in, and her notifications were almost nonstop. At first, she thought it was because people cared about CPR for pets. She was excited and rambling about how helpful the video must be. I was excited for her until I noticed the comments. They weren't about CPR. They weren't about the dog or their own experiences with health scares. They were about her, specifically her body. There was comment after comment making remarks about her figure. Men were dropping gross emojis and saying even more disgusting things. I pointed it out to her, and even after realizing that the attention she was getting wasn't for the information in the video, she didn't seem bothered by it at all. She was still so excited. I thought she'd take it down once she saw what kind of attention it was getting. I thought she'd be embarrassed or annoyed, maybe even a little creeped out. But instead, she loved the attention and didn't care if the comments were good or bad. She just cared that there were a lot of them. I kept my mouth shut because I didn't want to seem controlling or jealous of random people. She had already been fragile for months, and the last thing I wanted was to trigger another spiral. So I told myself that it was just a one-off incident and it would fade eventually, and then she'd go back to her regular content. I should have known better. Days after the post, the video kept climbing. It got the most views out of all her other ones, and all the attention she was getting only made her want more. So she changed. At first, she told herself and me she was just choosing cuter outfits because people engage more when the creator looks good. Then she said the yoga sets were comfortable to film in. It was one excuse after another, but the truth of it was obvious. Within 2 weeks, her entire style of content changed. She was still giving pet advice, but suddenly every single video looked like it was filmed right after a workout session. She was sweaty and wearing tight tops and shorter shorts. Tight tops, shorter shorts, matching sets every time. And the angles of the videos were always pretty suggestive. And all the comments were about her body. The rare comment asking for more advice or praising her for her help was totally drowned out by all the inappropriate ones. She pretended not to notice most days, Or maybe she did and just didn't really care. Either way, it got worse when the brand deals came. And once money got involved, she pushed even harder and got even more daring with the amount of skin she was willing to show. I kept trying to tell myself I was overreacting and that it was all harmless in the end, but deep down I knew that it wasn't true. Her videos kept changing. She shook her body more on camera, moved in ways designed to hold attention, and added these little gestures that were clearly meant to be provocative. She'd tilt her chest toward the camera while she talked, or adjust her top mid-sentence. She'd do all these suggestive things that she knew the creepy men who followed her would like, and I kept expecting her to be grossed out by it all, but that never happened. Instead, she was practically glowing. I'd always known she craved validation and attention. I just never expected that she wouldn't even care about the source of it. She was totally unbothered by the things they would say about her and her body. In fact, it was the happiest I had seen her since she lost her job. And that made it impossible to say much without feeling like I was killing her spark. So I watched from the sidelines, feeling sick and telling myself not to say anything because I didn't want to seem like the insecure boyfriend who couldn't handle his girlfriend succeeding, or one who didn't want her to find a new path or earn her own money. I was so afraid of that label that I swallowed my own discomfort just so I wouldn't be accused of being controlling, and I hated feeling like I couldn't even voice my concerns without being dismissed. But I did try to talk to her. Not often, but enough to feel the tension between us growing a little more each time. I'd bring it up cautiously and ask if she was sure she wanted to post certain things, or whether she had thought about how it might affect future job applications, if she wanted to go back to being a vet, or even just something else entirely. I expressed my concerns about whether it was safe to be so exposed online like that, but she brushed it all off every single time. She would say it was no big deal and that no one in the real world cares what's on TikTok. She'd claim that she was just having fun and accuse me of reading too much into it. And then, when I pushed a little harder, she'd shift into arrogance. She'd tell me that she wasn't going back to a clinic anyway, because content was clearly going to become her full-time job. Weeks passed like this, and for the sake of keeping the peace, I stopped checking her account entirely. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to know if she was barely wearing anything when she recorded or what comments she was encouraging. I focused on our actual relationship and the parts that existed when she wasn't setting up her phone. And when I ignored everything she did online, we were fine. Better than fine at times. When I chose to turn a blind eye to it all, it was like we were back to normal. We cooked more and watched shows together. We walked the dog together when we could. It felt real and familiar, and I couldn't help but hold on to it. She seemed softer with me during those offline hours, and just a little more present than usual. So I clung to that version of her because the alternative was starting to seem more and more like a stranger to me. But my ignorance didn't last for long. One afternoon, after weeks of refusing to look at her account for both of our sakes, curiosity finally got to me, and I checked out her page. I thought I was prepared, or at least had some idea of what I was putting myself through, but I wasn't. I scrolled through post after post, each one worse than the last, tight outfits that left nothing to the imagination. Her shaking her hips in frame, pointing at captions on screen. Her responding to comments that were outright sexual with laughing or heart emojis. It didn't feel like I was looking at my girlfriend anymore. It felt like I was watching a stranger with her face and body flirt with random men online. I scrolled until my stomach felt sick. Then I waited until she got back from spending time with her friends that night to confront her. I remember the way she walked inside, shopping bags lining her arm and a huge grin on her face. She tossed everything onto the couch and then took off her heels as she described how her day went to me and all the things that they did. It was only when I didn't say a word in response to her that she finally noticed me just sitting on one of the kitchen stools, glaring at her. "What?" she asked as she took off her earrings, looking incredibly confused. "You need to take those videos down," I demanded. She frowned. "What videos?" "You know exactly which ones." She rolled her eyes and sat down on the couch, letting out a sigh like she was both exhausted from the day and me. Not this again. I wasn't letting it go that time. I knew I had to stand my ground no matter how much she tried to rationalize it. "It's not a joke, Ava. You're putting yourself out there in ways you shouldn't be. There are men saying disgusting things about you and you're giving them exactly what they want." She rolled her eyes and shrugged. "Who cares? It's just the internet." "It isn't just the internet. It's disrespectful, it's inappropriate, and it's not okay," I argued. She scoffed. Oh my God, you're being dramatic. No, I said, voice steady. I'm being honest. What you're doing is wrong. You're making thirst traps on the internet when you're in a relationship. She pushed herself upright, glaring at me. I'm making money. Real money. More than I made at the clinic, and definitely more than you. If you're feeling insecure about it, just say that. There it was. The thing I had been avoiding for so long. I'd be lying if I said it didn't sting at that moment. It did. But you barely felt it at the time because it was overshadowed by all the anger I felt. I am not insecure, and that is not the point. It is the point. You're just upset because I'm succeeding in doing something you don't approve of. She pulled out her phone after that and tried to ignore me by checking her notifications. Instead of letting her dismiss me like usual, I walked over and sat right beside her. No, I'm upset because you're shaking your ass for strangers online and calling it work. Because it is work, she snapped back. It's not like I'm in love with any of them. They just give me views, and their comments help me with engagement. So, just stop with this insecure act. It makes you look even more pathetic. The word hit harder than I expected, and it was so jarring that I couldn't even think of something to say. She didn't wait for a response before she stood up, grabbed her phone off the coffee table, and walked down the hall without another word. She left me sitting there like I was the one who had done something wrong and like I was crazy for wanting boundaries. She left me there looking around like a fool and like I was small-minded for wanting my girlfriend to respect our relationship. The bedroom door shut behind her, and I was left feeling like an idiot and wondering how the hell things had gotten this bad. After that fight, things between Eva and me didn't just stay bad. They got worse in ways I didn't imagine were possible. Instead of slowing down or taking a step back after that night the way I'd hoped she might, she only doubled down. Her videos got even more indecent. She wore clothes that were tight and revealing. She even filmed some videos in bikinis and by the pool of our apartment building. Her content wasn't even recognizable anymore. It was completely different and blatantly catered to the men that followed her. I tried to tune it all out. I tried to stay off her page entirely, but I didn't have to check it to know what she was doing. Sometimes I could hear her filming from the bedroom or the living room, and every time she used this breathy, high-pitched voice or let out a giggle I'd never heard in real life, I felt something inside me twist. We barely spoke. She hovered around the apartment, filming, editing, or lounging between videos. I hovered around, avoiding her. It felt like we had become estranged, even though we were in a relationship, and despite it all, neither of us said the word breakup or made a move to leave. It was like we were stuck in a stalemate neither of us knew how to break. And then out of nowhere, our friend Kaylee reached out. We'd known her for years. She was one of those mutual friends who floated between our social circles. She was close enough to call her a friend, not close enough that we talked very often. We hadn't spoken in months when she texted, not since before Eva lost her job. When her text came through asking if I wanted to grab lunch with her, I said yes before I even thought it through. I needed a distraction. I needed something that wasn't the apartment or the constant sound of Eva's voice as she recorded videos or talked to men during live streams. Kaylee picked a small cafe near my office, and when I walked in and saw her waving, it was almost like I felt something come loose in my chest. I'd always been pretty fond of her, and she looked just as good as she usually did. She was smiley and bright, and she made me feel welcome the second I sat down. We talked about normal things at first. Work, and what we'd been up to in the months since we'd last spoken. Some random gossip from old friends, things like that. She had this familiar, dry sense of humor that made me laugh in a way I hadn't in months. She was easy to talk to, not because she said anything groundbreaking, but because she made acknowledged me and how I was doing in a way Eva hadn't done in a long time. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed just talking to someone who wasn't glued to their phone until I was sitting right in front of her. Eventually, though, the subject shifted, and the topic of Eva and her online presence became impossible to ignore. So, she said after a quiet moment, how's everything with Eva? I tried to brush it off at first, mumbling something vague about her being busy with work stuff and creating content, but Kaylee gave me a look that made it clear she wasn't buying it. She had seen the videos. I knew that before she even said anything. I was sure everyone in our circle and beyond had seen the video. You know she's really active online now, right? She asked gently. I looked down at my drink and tried to ignore how Kaylee bringing it up filled me with intense embarrassment. It was Eva dancing around on camera in next to nothing. Why should I be the one to feel embarrassed? Yeah, I know. There was a long pause, and then she leaned forward a little and placed her hand on mine. Are you okay? It was such a simple question, a simple gesture too, but I felt both pretty intensely. No one had asked me that in a long time, least of all my own girlfriend. It made me feel vulnerable in a way that wasn't entirely bad. It made me want to confide in her, even though I wasn't sure if I should. And I really didn't intend to spill anything, but once the gate cracked open, everything came pouring out. All the frustration I'd been holding in about the fights, the disrespect, and the strangers in her comments. I told her about the way Eva either talked to me with disrespect and was just plain rude, or didn't even talk to me at all. I unloaded everything, and Kaylee listened without interrupting. When I finally finished, she shook her head slowly. There was a frown on her face, like she was genuinely upset for me. I'm going to be honest, she said. I'd love to say I'm surprised, but I'm not. This is exactly the kind of thing Eva would do. You know, she's always been really full of herself. She turned my hand around on the table until she could lace our fingers together. It was very forward and a little inappropriate, but I couldn't bring myself to care in that moment. And don't let her trick you. It is disrespectful. What she's doing is so tasteless. Hearing someone else say it out loud and so plainly felt like relief, like someone had finally taken the weight off of my chest. And for the first time in a long time, I felt understood and like I wasn't losing my mind. It finally felt like my feelings weren't ridiculous or overly sensitive. It felt good to have someone on my side for once. And after that lunch, things changed between us. I didn't plan to get closer to Kaylee, it just happened. We never really stopped spending time together. Her office was only a few blocks away from mine, so grabbing lunch again made sense. And then it became a habit. We'd text here and there, sending funny things or venting about work. Then we started sitting together sometimes after work too. We'd meet up to just talk and tell each other about whatever had happened that day. We'd always gotten along, but then suddenly we were actually spending consistent time together, enough that a real closeness started to form. Something that felt a step further than friendship. It wasn't inappropriate for the most part, and not at first. I didn't flirt, and she didn't either. I kept telling myself it was just friendship, and that friendship wasn't a betrayal. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something growing in the background each time we hung out. And every day, it became harder to keep justifying me holding my feelings back for Kaylee, out of respect for Eva, when she didn't offer me any in return. In fact, she'd even gotten more reckless and uncaring. She had opened a P.O. box for her followers, mostly men, to send her things. And they did. Expensive things and inappropriate things. Things she would parade around the apartment without a shred of embarrassment. There were new outfits and jewelry. One person had even gone so far as to send her lingerie. And all these things she didn't bother hiding. Not the sexy underwear, and least of all the obscene and borderline stalkerish notes and letters. While it drove me crazy, she didn't even try to pretend they bothered her. She showed them off like trophies. I started feeling nauseous every time I walked into our apartment. Her gifts and her recording equipment were everywhere. Everything was a reminder of how far we'd sunk, and it was to the point where my own apartment didn't even start to feel like home anymore. And I was sick of all of it. Sick of her and sick of what she had turned our life together into. I started to stay out more and work even longer. I said yes whenever Kaylee asked to hang out, and eventually I stopped waiting for her to ask. I'd just text first. I was doing any and everything I could to avoid stepping into that apartment and seeing another package addressed to her from her fans. So when Kaylee asked if I wanted to come to her place for drinks one night, I agreed instantly. I don't even think a full second passed between her question and my answer. I needed to be anywhere but home. Her apartment was cozy and warm, a little familiar since both Eva and I had been there a few times over the years. We sat on her couch, drinking and talking, and for a while it felt like life was normal again, like it was back to the way it should be. As the night went on, I kept trying to ignore the connection between us and the way she looked at me. There was this way that she laughed, and the way she did her best to touch me when she spoke, that I just couldn't stop thinking about. I also couldn't help but notice just how beautiful she looked when she smiled, and how comfortable she seemed in her own space. Being around her was completely different from the chaos that Eva brought. I didn't know if it was the alcohol, the months of resentment, or the fact that Kaylee and I had grown closer than I meant for us to. Maybe it was all of it. Maybe it didn't matter. All I know is then, when she leaned in to kiss me that night, I didn't pull away. I kissed her back. It wasn't rushed or sloppy. And despite the circumstances, it wasn't the kind of kiss that felt wrong in the moment. It was warm and soft and full of all the feelings we'd been trying to bury under silence and friendliness. Things got more heated as the minutes passed, and our hands moved over each other, and eventually, the tension between us cracked open in a way that felt impossible to stop once it started. We ended up in her bedroom that night, and that was how we ended up having sex. All I could focus on, during and after, was Kaylee. I was surprised by just how much Eva didn't cross my mind in those moments, and me not thinking about her allowed what I shared with Kaylee to be pure in its own way, not affected by worry or guilt. It didn't surprise me when things didn't end after that night with Kaylee. Being with Kaylee didn't feel like a one-time mistake or a moment of weakness or something I regretted. Still, it wasn't like I went out of my way to start an affair with her after that. It honestly just kept happening. Just like after that first lunch we had, whatever started between us didn't stop once we parted ways. It stretched out into the next week, and the one after that, and then the next. We kept meeting and talking and sleeping together, all while Eva remained clueless and occupied. Every time I told myself I should slow down or rethink things, I never actually did. I'd say the words in my head, but my actions never matched them because I didn't want them to. And while all that was going on with Kaylee, things with Eva stayed frigid. She barely looked at me, and when she did, it wasn't with affection. It was either irritation or mockery. It felt like there wasn't a shred of warmth left, and honestly, most days it left me wondering what we were still doing together. I used to think the worst feeling in a relationship was anger, but it wasn't. The worst feeling was indifference, and we had both developed a lot of that toward each other. And the strangest part was how little guilt I felt through it all. I kept waiting for that crushing sense of remorse people always talk about. I expected that moment of staring at the ceiling, thinking about what I'd done, and the shaking, sinking feeling in my stomach. I mean, we'd been together for years at that point, but nothing ever came. I didn't feel guilty, and it felt like I was past the point of feeling conflicted. All the anger that I'd felt for Eva just kind of evaporated after I got involved with Kaylee, and I was left feeling a kind of weird relief. With her, I felt wanted and appreciated, and the absence of guilt confused me more than the cheating itself. I wasn't sure what to do with myself because nothing about it felt the way I had imagined it would. And Kaylee didn't push me for anything. She didn't demand labels or pressure me about Eva or try to direct my decisions. She was patient in a way that made everything feel easy. She was gentle in the way she talked to me and brought up our relationship or mine with Eva. She never asked me where things were going or what I planned to do. She just let things flow, and her patience made room for me to actually feel things instead of trying to escape them. Because of that, I eventually had to face the truth I'd been avoiding, and that was that I had real feelings for her. Not casual infatuation or rebound delusions, actual serious feelings, ones that made me think about her all day and look forward to seeing her more than anything else, ones that made me avoid Eva even more and imagine something long-term without even meaning to. But those feelings only made everything more confusing because I still lived with Eva, still shared a dog and an apartment. I still had years of history weighing down every decision, and I didn't know what to do about any of it. Half of me felt torn between the two of them, and the other half felt numb. It put me in this limbo where I was trying to keep both sides of my life from collapsing, but the more time passed, the clearer it became that I wasn't actually confused. I just didn't want to confront the obvious because it would mean that I'd wasted years of my life with someone I didn't end up building a future with. Because the difference between them was becoming impossible to ignore. Kaylee made me feel good and like someone worth giving a shit about. She grounded me and made me feel cared for. Eva did none of those things. She stomped around the apartment wearing next to nothing, talking to her phone more than she ever talked to me. She mocked me openly and flaunted all the money she was making online in my face. She made snide comments about how a real man wouldn't be bothered by the attention she got, and how I should be grateful to be dating someone other men found attractive. The more time I spent with Kaylee, the more obvious it became that there wasn't really some confusing decision to be made at all. It was clear who was better for me, who I wanted to be with, and it wasn't the woman I still lived with. The breaking point came on a random afternoon. I had just finished giving our dog a bath, something Ava used to help with but hadn't done in months. I walked into the living room, towel drying him, and there she was, standing in the middle of the room with her arms crossed and her face twisted up like she'd been waiting for me. "We need to talk," she said. I felt my stomach drop, not out of fear, but out of annoyance. I was tired and damp. She looked ready to explode, and I really didn't want to have to deal with it. I needed your phone, she said sharply. I was trying to film a transition, and while I was setting up, your messages started coming in. Before I could even try to form a sentence, she continued. From Kaylee, she spat. What the hell is going on? I knew without looking at the phone the kind of messages she'd found. Flirty ones, no doubt. Maybe even ones that were overtly sexually since we had plans to meet later that night. I stared at her for a second, shocked more by her nerve than the situation. She'd gone through my phone and read my texts. I didn't even know she knew my password up until that moment. You don't have the right to go through my stuff, I said, my voice low and irritated. I'm allowed to have friends. You certainly have plenty of friends online. It's not the same thing, she snapped. These messages aren't friendly. They're disgusting. What you're doing is cheating. I waited for the instinct to deny it and to apologize, but nothing came. There wasn't even a flicker of panic or guilt. Instead, I felt mostly nothing but also a little clarity. I realized in that moment that things with me and her were so far beyond broken, and not only would we not be able to ever fix it again, I was certain that I didn't even want to. So I told her the truth. Yeah, I said. I'm sleeping with Kaylee. The way her eyes shot wide open would have been funny if the situation wasn't more serious. She stepped back a little like I'd slapped her. I didn't give her time to recover before I continued. And I want to be with her. Something inside me had finally opened up. Every ounce of anger and exhaustion and resentment poured out. I was sick of her behavior and pretending there was anything left to salvage. Her confronting me wasn't the spectacle she thought it was. It was actually just the push I needed. I'm done, Ava, I said. I'm breaking up with you. I told her that plainly and then explained that she had only a week to pack her things and move out of my apartment. She could go film her thirst trap somewhere else. Suddenly, all that arrogance she'd been walking around with disappeared. Her entire tone changed, and she immediately started begging. She was pleading with me, grabbing my arm and apologizing over and over. When she saw that I wasn't moved by any of it, she started telling me she loved me and that she didn't want to lose me. She said she didn't want to ruin what we had and swore she would stop making her videos and interacting with men online. She promised she'd change. It was obvious she was just saying whatever she thought would make me stay, but I didn't care anymore. It's too late, I said. I'm exhausted. I'm done being around you and I'm done being with you. I picked up my keys and told her I was leaving. I'm going to Kaylee's, I announced, and then I told her that she had turned the apartment into a toxic, suffocating place, and that some of her things had better be packed when I got back, or I would throw some of it out. And then I left thinking that was the end of things and the hard part was over, but I was wrong because the days that followed were chaos. She did eventually pack her things and move out, but that wasn't the last I saw of her. She texted nonstop and called at all hours. She even showed up outside Kaylee's apartment building a few times, screaming my name. I chased her off each time, but that never seemed to deter her. The begging didn't stop even though she no longer lived with me. Meanwhile, things with Kaylee got better than ever. We were finally free to be together without sneaking around, and it didn't take long before we started talking about her moving in. It made sense since we're together most days anyway. The only problem was Eva. After she moved out, she kind of spiraled again. It's been just under 2 weeks since she moved out, and she's done a complete 180. The woman who told me I was insecure and pathetic is now calling me every chance that she gets and sending long messages about how she misses me. Voicemail after voicemail about how she can't sleep and how she regrets everything. She's even showed up at the apartment that on top of changing the locks, I had to get a security system installed. I've threatened to call the police more than once, but it doesn't scare her. And she's even become so obsessed with trying to get me back that she's hardly been posting. Her page had been tossed aside now that she's completely focused on trying to get me back. But I don't want her back. I'm happy with Kaylee, and I finally feel like myself again. So all I can do now is ignore Eva's messages and her calls, and hope that one day she finally understands that we're over and that I'm not coming back. I will admit that it is kind of funny how I've become her latest obsession when I don't even want anything to do with her.